Well, thank you guys for having us here today. My name is Courtney Toll. I'm the founder of Nori, which is a clothing care company, probably best known for our handheld steam iron, kind of looks like a hair straightener. But my company has very much been the product of paid acquisition success. We've scaled to 8 figures in revenue in 2 years with a 3-person team. But I love talking about this specific topic, which is acquisition and retention. And we have some experts here with us today. They're going to guide us through both an agency perspective and a founder perspective on how they're approaching probably 2 of the most important topics in e-com today. So let's start and have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how long you've been in e-com.
Hello? Test? Yeah, I'll give you that one. Hello? Hey, my name is Drew Sanocki. I am the CEO and co-founder of PostPilot. I've been in direct mail, I've been in DTC for 20 years. I started my first brand in 2000, mostly running turnarounds. So my career has been like buying these brands, doing 100 million, losing 10. And then my job was like to get them profitable and then ideally sell them. And one of the ways I did that was I found out these brands were not using direct mail. So I would like go in and implement a direct mail program and get, another 10 or 20%. So I started a platform to help me do that better. The original vision was like Klaviyo for postcards, something that plugs into my stack and then makes it really easy to do direct mail. I started PostPilot 5 years ago, and now we've grown, just like you, up to mid-8 figures, but with 100 people. So I'm always in awe of like brands like yours and Matt's that have like a handful of people that are bigger than we are. But
it does take a village, though. It's not just 3, right?
Yeah, and we're growing. We've got 10,000 brands on the platform now. We just closed our first equity round from Summit Partners, and Klaviyo put some money in. And that was like all of 2 weeks ago. So that was like my first half of the year, and happy to be here.
Sure. Well, this too, but give me the mic. I don't think so.
Hello.
But great handshake. Hey guys, my name is Matt Mullenax. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Huron. We're a men's personal care brand. I have not been in e-commerce as long as Drew, but prior to starting Huron, I worked at Morgan Stanley briefly, even shorter than Deepa. Started in 2008, left in 2008, but joined Bonobos as employee number 5 in December of 2008. Did that for a number of years. Moved to Chicago, worked at UBS, so back in investment banking, spent time in a growth equity firm, went to business school, and then launched Huron shortly thereafter in 2019. So kind of my second go-around in e-commerce. Although this one doesn't involve sprinting to FedEx at 5:54 p.m. every day because we have a 3PL now. It also doesn't involve bringing hockey bags to and from the garment district and carrying pants 5 at a time back to our office because we have we have a freight forwarder now. So the e-commerce atmosphere has evolved tremendously since 2008, 2010, early days since you started. So acquisition retention efforts, obviously tremendously different. So excited to chat more on that front today.
Hey everyone, I'm Karim. I'm one of the co-founders at Pearmill. I have been in the DTC space for 6-7 years. The agency's been around for about 4 years. We've managed about 500 million in spend across different brands like Recess, Adams, Tavala, but we also do a lot of non-DTC. And we focus on paid acquisition channels, specifically performance, specifically paid social and paid search. So your Meta, your Google, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, all that. Yeah, excited to get into the details with all of you.
Amazing. Well, some awesome perspectives here. Given that the panel is on acquisition and retention, what channels right now, given the current market environment, are proving most effective?
All right, I run a direct mail business. So I was going to say direct mail, but within direct mail, I can tell you what's working. The first, I think, is like a general rule of thumb is like the lowest hanging fruit is to mine your owned audiences better. So we see brands, someone earlier mentioned, it's really reactivation, but somebody who's bought from you and hasn't bought in 2 years, going back in recency is always a good idea to re-engage those and try to reacquire, whether it's SMS, email, or direct mail to hit them. And then the next lowest hanging fruit is probably like warm retargeting. We've got an ability where you could correlate like 30 to 40% of the cold traffic on your site that never drops an email address with a physical address and drop a catalog or a postcard. We do the same thing with email. So everybody here has like this big email list of people who have never bought. They're fence sitters. They've seen like every offer that you've sent them and they still haven't purchased. We correlate about 30% of that to a physical address. You can drop, again, a catalog or postcard. And that converts really well. I think Hexclad did $1 million in revenue off that one over Black Friday. So that's what I'd say we see working on owned audiences. And then direct mail does lookalikes. So it's just like Meta. We take your existing customer data. We can do a lookalike off that. And then you can cold prospect through direct mail. Doesn't work for everybody. I would say like lower AOVs, not as well, but it works. So I'd recommend checking that one out.
Need a mic. So also a small team, Courtney. We're 4 people at Huron. So one of my big strategies this year is to focus on focus. So whereas before we were running paid search, we were dabbling in TikTok, we were doing all these things okay at best. We are quadrupling down on Meta because that is still what works for us. So I would say 97% of our acquisition spend is still Meta. On the retention side, we've been working with Drew and team for probably about a year, but would say as of late, we've really kind of turned up the dial on what are unique strategies to engage non-subscribers in Klaviyo or PostScript, for instance. Again, finding like really low-hanging fruit opportunities to get in front of people. 100% of people look at their mail. 50% of people open their emails, maybe, if you're lucky. So law of large numbers, direct mail is something we're super excited about on the retention side. And that was not sponsored.
Just like Matt was saying, Meta is still one of the main channel that we advertise on, as well as Google. About 40% of our spend is on Meta, 40% is on Google. The rest is split between Reddit, TikTok, Snap. Reddit is the interesting one that started to come out more recently. It's been getting smarter as a platform. But realistically, if you're trying to scale, if you're trying to get good CPAs, it's Meta or Google, and you have to try to make those work. And every one of our clients that, just to boost this up, every one of our clients that's done direct mail has found really good success with it. So we often recommend them to try it out, do a little test.
Really cool. We have not tested direct mail, so I think that'll be my first step post this panel here. But kind of to what Matt was saying, a lot of brands have refocused on things that are converting given the market environment. We too are investing over 90% of our marketing spend in Meta. But people talk a lot about hacks that they found. It's one thing to say, we're investing in direct mail or investing in Google or Meta. Is there any hack that you guys have found in the last 12, 24 months that has catalyzed increased conversion?
I wanted to show our hack, which I think is a really cool product. I'll hand this out. Has anybody gotten like a shared mailer, like a Valpak or something? Show of hands. Yeah. So shared mailers are interesting because basically all the brands share the cost of that. So you get an envelope and there's like 10 or 20 different pieces of paper. And you can get in a household for like 10 cents. So that's really interesting. The problem with the pack is that brand adjacency is poor. You might be in a cool apparel brand and you're in there next to like adult incontinence products and like a wireless carrier. And then the only thing, they target off of geography, right? So it's just like San Diego gets a pack. So we wanted to do something cool. My first brand was a design brand, and I always loved like the Dwell magazine or Domino magazine editors' picks. So this is the one time I poached somebody at our company. We poached like the editor from Dwell who did that section. And we came up with this really cool product, which is like a new shared mailer. There's like editorial on it, right? And we choose brands that go together, and it goes along a theme, like Father's Day or paleo or CrossFit or golf. This one's a morning makeover. And it's still, so like the brands are paying a really low rate to get into a household. And what you can do with this on a targeting basis is you do a lookalike off the brands together. So it's like you're creating a shared audience. It works really well. I would say like ROAS off cold traffic is like 1 to 5, depending on the brand. It's not for everybody. I mean, we've had brands, I think Magic Spoon was here. They did one that didn't work. They don't always work. But this is, I think, one of the cooler things that we see working now. And the targeting's crazy. Like there's 1,000 attributes you can target off of, like life events, third trimester of the mother is like really good. If you sell a baby product, that you do great targeting there, or has diabetes, or lives 5 miles from a Target if you want to drive people into store to purchase. So that's I think one of the cooler hacks we're seeing right now.
I hate the word hack, the concept.
It's a
so
growth
cringe.
hack. That's a growth hack.
Also, if you just read DTC Twitter, you'll come out with plenty of hacks. But I'm pretty convinced that the greatest hacks aren't being serviced, because why would you? This is probably a boring answer, but I think for us, one of the things that's been most successful over the past 3 to 6 months is really taking a step back to assess kind of this 3-way intersection of where's our gross margin the strongest, what are people coming back to buy, and where's retention the strongest? Well, I guess that's the same. What's the third piece? Oh, where do we have CPA appetite? So if CPA jumps by 20%, we would be okay with that because we can withstand that jump in cost. And I think kind of peeling back those layers of the onion has led us to a series of offers that have quite honestly been game-changing for us over the past 3 to 4 months. So rather than saying like, oh, TikTok shops or affiliate is like the new hack, it's actually just quadrupling down on your own business and your own numbers to understand, here's where we have room to play. Here are the products that bring people back into the fold. What can we do, or what can we dress up from an offer testing standpoint to really maximize exposure and offer?
Yeah, I don't think that we quite have hacks on the channel side. Like there's nothing that we do in the channels that no one else is doing that makes it break out. But if I were to use the word hack, I would apply it to operational hacks or like mentality hacks on our team. So one thing that we started to do when we first started as an agency, we would have our media buyers run the creative tests. They would analyze the creative, then they would write briefs to the creative team. But we switched it up a bit so that the creative team were the ones that were actually doing the analyses themselves. There's something different that happens when a creative who worked on the asset is analyzing, because they're looking at like the motion of the ad, like what shows up in the first few seconds, like the composition, the negative space, all stuff that media buyers aren't necessarily going to look at. I was just looking at like value prop here, sequential of ads. Okay, let me say to the creative person, I need this combination and it's gonna be the best ad ever. That's not the case. It's not rational. People don't engage with ads logically, so you can't reason into it. The other hack is completely escaping my brain right now, but it's also a bit more operational on like how the team is structured. How we think about the channels is we actually look at the channels almost as like we try to personify the channels in a way, like humanize them, and that makes you understand like what the channel needs. Like, all right, Meta needs this much more information in order to get to a significant amount of learnings to make this decision. So when you start to like negotiate with the channel and you understand what it needs in order to get to levels of success, that's what really unlocks our operational success, more so than like individual one tactic that makes everything work.
I think that makes total sense, and you're so right. Hack has sort of become this buzzword in the D2C world, and I think the reality is that one hack that works for one company is probably not the hack that works for the other. But when you can look at categories, like you were sort of saying, Drew, and what's working for a product that is selling to an adjacent market, maybe there's some shared hacks to be looked at there. So not to single you guys out too much, but I do have a question for each of you, starting with Karim. Given your focus on paid acquisition, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of testing and how you don't compromise a very aggressive scaling strategy with significant A/B testing.
That's a really good question. I would love to be in a position where we don't have to run tests. Like everything just works right out of the gate, and we don't have to allocate any budget to it. But the reality is that we do, and we have a really particular way in which we run creative tests. I'll give an example on Meta just to get tactical for a second, so it could be useful to walk away with. We create separate campaigns for any test that we run. Our evergreen campaigns should be like untouched. They should be any change should be very high conviction that this change is likely to succeed. And then we have our separate campaigns where we run the tests on, because the channels are sensitive, and if they're going to be sensitive, let's have them be sensitive just in the testing ones. So we have benchmarks within the campaigns, and we run the creative against the benchmark in batches. We're not just putting all of our creatives in an ad set and letting them duel it out. We actually want to get the learnings from the results. So we don't just want to know the fact that one creative is doing better than the other. We want to learn why. And so we need to give things equal budget. We analyze the ones that did worse, how they did much worse. So keeping it separate is one thing. And then the other thing is just to analyze your success in testing. Don't just run the tests, but have metrics that measure your likelihood of, or the frequency of your tests succeeding. So we have win rates for our creative tests. What percentage of our ads start to get a significant amount of spend? And if that's below a certain threshold, then we know that our testing methodology is off. It's hurting the evergreen campaigns. We also have unicorn rates, which is everyone who's done advertising has had this at some point, where they see one ad that takes over almost all the spend and just lives for months, and you can't beat it until eventually it collapses and falls apart. Your whole business, you have to rethink it. But just take a look at your success of testing, not just the individual tests that you're doing, is how we balance success for evergreen and success in testing.
Just to add one thing to that, I think one of the most important exercises that we do, even as a small team, is we conduct postmortems. So yesterday, we did a huge debrief of our Memorial Day weekend sale. So what worked, what didn't work, what was first day of sales compared to rolling 30-day average, rolling 60-day sales average of the previous 30-day period to say okay, can we expect a bump of X for our birthday promo that will run in July, or Black Friday, Cyber Monday? But point is we're constantly turning a new page in our notebook to write down a bunch of things. We rarely go back, and I think it's the going back process which can be more important. So that's something that even as a small team that we've instilled pretty early on that's been really, really helpful.
I think that makes total sense, and you're exactly right. Everyone has been there where you have that ad and you feel golden for about 2 months, and when it falls apart, you start to panic. And so having those opportunities to consistently, even when things are working, say, this is perhaps why it's working, and line up what those next 3 winners could be, so you're not in that position of we got too comfortable with ad X performing. Also want to turn to you, Drew. So obviously direct mail is considered perhaps a little bit more of an old-fashioned marketing strategy. 2 questions for you. One just that came up out of curiosity. One, is there any specific type of brand that when you can look at either a type of product or category or AOV that you typically say, that's going to work really well for direct mail? And 2, are you currently encouraging your customers to sort of blend direct mail with some of their other acquisition channels like Meta or TikTok?
Yeah, we don't. It's not a one size fits all. Some brands are a better fit. I would say if you are just starting out, or 1 or 2 million in revenue, I wouldn't start with direct mail. There are easy ways you could sit in front of Facebook and test for a couple $100 until you dial in your creative and your offer. It's really when we see brands get north of 5 million, 10 million, that it makes sense. And because you want to be to the point where you drop like 50K a month and you're making $250,000 in revenue. And the value prop for those brands is like when you've gotten that big, all of a sudden you want to build a more resilient business because we've all been burned just being reliant on one channel, be it Amazon or Meta. Prices go up, they go down, you get locked out of your account. So all of a sudden you want to, okay, I want a number 2 channel that's predictable, right? CFOs love direct mail because at that, the price you pay for your CPA, your CPM is going to be the same today as it is over Black Friday, right? It's predictable, it's easy to measure, right? And you want to just be at that scale where it kind of makes sense to add that on. And I would say AOV wise, like the higher AOVs tend to do better. I probably wouldn't recommend it for much below, especially on prospecting below like $50. But apparel does well, furniture does well, like a lot of those big categories that have traditionally tapped the channel. And then in terms of like direct mail or Meta, it's not always an either or. Like one thing you should realize about direct mail is like it's going to work better if you stack up the same campaign and you split your list and it's like half goes out. The offer goes out in email, the offer goes out in direct mail, or the offer goes out in Meta, offer goes out in direct mail. Direct mail is always going to convert more and lead to higher lifetime value customers. The rub is it costs more to send the campaign, right? So you just got to like be ahead of those numbers. And some of the more successful brands, like Fiore drops a catalog and then they chase it with Meta retargeting that has the same creative. And you do that and you're going to do better than either channel independently. So it's like there's a lot you can do synergistically working with an agency that does both. Like you guys, are in a great position to offer both because it's really like a holistic way to get in front of a customer.
Yes, so Matt, going off of that, because you do advertise both online and through direct mail, how do you think about them integrating to create a cohesive customer journey? Is it similar where you're sending out mail and then retargeting or vice versa?
Yeah, I think the important part is it is that a cohesive customer journey. So oftentimes it's similar messaging, similar offer. We think a lot about copy and how we're presenting ourselves kind of in the physical world as we are on the digital side of things. So I think it's that consistency piece that's really, really important. For us, we run $0 in retargeting on Meta. So that is truly a prospecting channel, whereas we use a PostPilot largely for retention efforts. But again, I think it all starts with the creative and the offer to say, what is the most consistent piece or position that we can lead with that we feel confident on the back end from a margin standpoint, from a retention standpoint, and then kind of tying those loose ends together in the form of top of funnel meta creative, but then backing it up with what we're doing on PostPilot. So it really is kind of that consistency of thread between creative and messaging.
That's really interesting. And we also use Meta pretty much solely for prospecting. And I think a lot of brands are starting to think about the channel more that way as CAC is increasing. So that's super interesting to think about what other channels can be turned on from a retargeting standpoint that is not associated with that level of acquisition cost. Last question, and then we'll open it up to questions. I always love asking people, what is the number one mistake that you see brands making right now in regards to acquisition and retention?
For us, it's direct mail is still, think direct response. Like you still want an offer and ideally you want some urgency. It's like a deadline, buy one, get one, or a discount. People don't like discounts. Like, I think when brands fail, at least with the channel that I know the best, in direct mail, I think it's because they come in and they want to do like a pure branding exercise. And they overestimate how much that will resonate with the customer. And they don't really have any way to measure success. And then they dismiss the whole channel because it didn't work. So it's still, at the end of the day, a direct response medium. Like you think of a postcard, think of a Facebook ad. Like you want a call to action on there. It's just good marketing principle for, I think, any of your advertising. But that's probably the number one mistake.
Yeah, I guess I have two. One is really boring, and I've talked about it a bunch, but just like knowing your numbers. I think we're all kind of in the mindset of like chasing the bright, shiny object, whether it's TikTok shops or like something else that seems to be very much in the zeitgeist. But it's really hard to craft a compelling, sustainable offer if you don't know what it means kind of behind the scenes and on your P&L and balance sheet. So it's really starting from a point of financial literacy to say like, okay, this is truly our best foot forward because this product crushes, it brings people back, and we make a ton of money from it. For us, that's fragrance, which I brought samples, so please accost me for a sample so I don't have to take them back to the office. So that's one. Two, which I'm now completely blanking on. Again, I think it pertains to meta. I think there's this element of, oh, this didn't work, like let me nix it immediately. You have to give the platform time to respond. I also think there's this fallacy of we only need to focus on what's underperforming and quickly kill those, where we actually see the most escape velocity coming from, oh, this is an ad that's crushing. Like, how do we quickly iterate and make 20 copies or versions of this? So we spend a lot of time thinking about like, oh, this is underperforming, this is underperforming, this is underperforming. Let's let the winners do their thing versus how do we double down and create multiple versions of those winners and create kind of escape velocity that way?
It makes me so happy that you said that. Like it's the amount of conversations that we have around that is quite a bit. Like focus on what's working. Don't prioritize focusing on what's like losing as much as you're focusing on what's working. The other thing that I would say within Meta or any channel actually, as Google as well, if you're scaling, especially if you're going to be scaling for a sale or a period where you have high seasonality, is if you start scaling too late, you're basically going to pay like a price. You're going to pay a penalty. Like we said, the channels are sensitive. The channels need time. And so, for example, like for Black Friday, we have one account that goes from basically like 30,000 in spend to 1.5 million a month. We start scaling them end of September. We start gradually scaling, increasing, running tests, so that by the time we reach Black Friday, the channel is accustomed to how it's going to act at that spend level. We know which set of creatives, which audiences we're going to focus on. So the sooner that you're able to start scaling, the better usually. And this has been repeated about not testing your offer is like if you have like one price point that's stuck in your head and you're not going to test what that price point is, whether it's a discount or not, you're leaving a lot on the table. You just won't know until you test it. So.
Amazing. Super helpful across the board. Want to open it up for questions, so feel free to just raise your hand if you have one. Any questions? Yeah.
Great answers, everybody. Thank you so much for that. With products like Nori or with Huron, it's really important to test it out, but customers don't always want to test it out because they're afraid of wasting money or just unable to access the products that are directly to consumers. So what are ways that brands can kind of navigate that?
Yeah, really good question. We do offer samples for some of our products, but I think like directly beneath the CTA is a great point of real estate on your storefront to say like, what are all the points of pushback that could prohibit someone from clicking this button and just address them right on. It's 60-day return policy. It's free shipping. It's speak to a live agent. It's anything that would prohibit you from basically pushing buy now or add to cart or whatever the CTA is and just tackling those head on. I think we've tested that a lot and that's been really, really beneficial for us. But unless your conversion rate is 100%, then there's room to grow, right? I don't think anyone in this room has a 100% conversion rate. If so, I'd love to talk to you. So it's thinking about like, what are those pain points and just tackling those head on would be my best answer.
And if we can get something from Nori as well in this regard.
Yeah, I would say similar. We spend a lot of time on user education in our creative that we're putting into paid acquisition. I think one of the things that works to our benefit is we have a super demonstrative product, so you're literally watching it work. So I would say that certainly works to our benefit because you're sort of demoing intrinsically in all the creative that you're putting out. We also have a fairly generous return policy. But by and large, I think it's also driving home like the rationale for a product. You can say you want to test a product, but when you very clearly outline the white space that you're filling, typically I find that if you're accurately conveying the problem that you're trying to solve, people are going to be quite happy with a product that actually is solving it.
one last question.
Cheers, thanks. So it's probably more one for Courtney and Matt. Is influence a part of your mix? And if it is, what was the thing that made it click and enabled you to scale it?
I would say it's a new part of our mix, as I just talked about focus this whole time. But the way we think about kicking off this new channel, let's call it, is starting with what we'll call our brand friends. It's folks we sent products to for a number of years already, so it doesn't feel as transactional as like the first cold DM, right? And I think for us, what's nice about our category in particular is lower cost of goods, right? So we can start from a very non-transactional starting point of like, before you do anything, like let's send you a bunch of product to make sure you like it first. So that immediately kind of flips the switch away from like, send us your rate card to like, hey, let's just get you product. And before we even have a conversation, like, let's make sure you enjoy the products, which we have a high degree of confidence that this creator will. From there, I think the structures can take a bunch of different forms, right? There's like retainer-based partnerships. We have one or two of those. But we're actually working on more of a traditional affiliate model, which has been pretty well received. And we're working on scaling that a little bit. But we're still pretty early innings in our kind of influencer efforts.
Yeah, I feel like this has changed so much, honestly, over the past 24 months. When we first launched, paid influencer partnerships were huge, very hard to track attribution. So we've now kind of approached it one of two ways. We're really big into product seeding. A ton of brands are doing it, but basically sending out at least 150, 200 products a month in exchange for content, which can then be repurposed in paid capacities. And I also think that these smaller, more highly engaged audiences of micro and nano influencers tend to lead to increased conversion. And then the second is truly co-branded partnerships. So coming out with an exclusive colorway with some type of talent or often other brand where the products are complementary, often relying on a rev share agreement instead of these, really costly upfront fees.
Awesome, thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for being up here and thanks for having us.